we bring in one of our old friends, Christine Brennan of USA Today, to talk about a bunch of different things, but we'll start with college sports. Christine, welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for doing this. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm great to be with you guys. I'm doing great. Thank you. Obviously, we're in the midst of extraordinary times in the world, and especially with how the U.S. has and has not handled this. I'm in D.C., Washington right now, but beautiful weather, a little hot. I'm great. My family's great. Very fortunate and very lucky, and feeling good. So, and busy. What a time to be a journalist. Never root for this ever, ever, ever. We wish it weren't happening, but never been a more interesting time and more important time, I think, to be a journalist. Even in sports, sports in our culture. There's so many issues that are intertwined with the nation and the world at large. And so I'm always honored to be able to be a journalist, but even more so right now during this important time.
You mentioned you're in Washington right now. We're going to get to college football in a minute. The Washington Football Club situation with Daniel Schneider. Christine, do you think I shouldn't say when anymore to anything, 2 months from today, give or take, is supposed to be the start of the NFL season. Do you think there will be a changing of the name of that football team within the next 60 days?
I absolutely do, yes. And what a wonderful thing that is.
Right.
Or if they can't figure it out, then just call them the Washingtons. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. But yes, I do not believe they will play a game with this awful racist name, anymore. I covered the team when I was at the Washington Post in the 80s when they actually won games and won Super Bowls, which most, if anyone is, like 25 or younger, they have no recollection of that in Washington. Right. A great franchise that has just been ruined and gutted. But I've said the name, tens of thousands of times when I was covering the team, but the awareness over the last few years, back actually in 2013, I said it once. I was giving a speech, and I said, "Wait a minute, that's just a racist, awful name. I won't say it again." So I call them the Washington NFL team, and it's not easy to do sometimes. I almost slip, but it is just such an awful name. And money talks. It's as much as all the native leaders have been so terrific, and I've been on panels with them, and I've quoted them. And others have been great on this topic. It took the corporate sponsors, FedEx and Bank of America, Nike, PepsiCo, all of them coming down so hard on Dan Snyder. And you know what? That's fine. Whatever it took, it's over. It has to be over. And it's the right decision. People who say it's politically correct, guys, it is just correct. Could you start a team now in any of our North American leagues with that name? Of course not. Right. Try explaining it to a 12-year-old. Try to explain that name to a 12-year-old. Good luck. Let me know how it goes. It is racist. It is awful. It is appalling. And thankfully, it is on its way out the door.
It's funny because I'm going to steal that, by the way, the politically correct and just correct, because we started calling them the Washingtonians on this show. I don't know how far back now, probably around the same time. So we've been going Washingtonians with this team for a while. But the one thing that, and listen, I get what Dan Snyder is doing here. He was clinging to something, but isn't there an argument to be made that he could also make more money? Like, just go to Nike and say, let's make some money off of this, and people would be glad to help him get off of this name, wouldn't they?
Oh, for sure. Sure. There's no doubt. So let's say, the name is done, which I believe it will be. Mm-hmm. So everyone is going to want, not everyone, but a lot of fans will want to buy up the last of the old stuff, right? All the retro stuff. So they'll want to buy up all the R-word stuff, the skins, and or they'll order more. I mean, I guess conceivably some could still be made. So there's going to be a great market for that, for the hats and the T-shirts of the old guard, especially those people who will be angry that it's being changed. Mm-hmm. And they may even demand that, maybe they'll even wear it for a while, right? Because maybe that'll be a statement, a political statement. And Lord knows we got people making political statements all over the place in this country. So why not? Okay, that'll happen. Then you'll have the new stuff. So let's call them the Warriors or the, whatever they want to call them. The Washington Americans. We've got the Nationals playing baseball, the Americans, the Washington Monuments, whatever. And then you can have all that new stuff. So all the new T-shirts and jerseys and hats and caps and everything. And people are going to just go crazy wanting to buy that as well. So to me, you do have to pay, I guess, for trademarking these things. So there would be a cost. But the amount of money that Dan Schneider could make with that name change would be extraordinary. So just capitalism alone, guys. Absolutely. Capitalism alone. It's the right decision to make.
Christine Brennan with us on Tim and Sid. Christine's a columnist with USA Today. Christine, football, college sports. We don't know about the NFL yet. They haven't decided on preseason games. They haven't totally finalized what they want to do. But one by one, it seems that conferences and institutions are starting to step back from their original statements that we're going to play and we're going to play in front of fans. And now it's, well, if we play, it's just going to be conference games and we're canceling the out of conference things and we're not quite sure where we are. Look, the University of Michigan does about $10 million for every home game in ticket sales and merch. It's not just their football programs. These major programs at major institutions, football and basketball, fund effectively the entire athletic department and all the other teams. What can the ramifications be if there is no college football?
If there's no college football this fall, it will be catastrophic for U.S. universities. That is, there's no sugarcoating this. Yeah. It will be a disaster. And that's why, obviously, universities are going to try to fight as much as they can to have their fall sports. The Ivy League is in a different situation. Obviously, football is not as big a deal to the Ivy League. The endowments and the money coming into the Ivy League is off the charts, and for many reasons, obviously most of them good reasons. And so, but the Ivy League just canceling its fall season does have an impact. I think it has a big impact. Just as the Ivy League was the first to cancel in March, as the pandemic was getting going, our shutdown was starting to happen, Ivy League led the way. They canceled their men's and women's basketball tournament. 2 days later, the NCAA cancels the men's and women's basketball tournament. Ivy League cancels its spring sports, and the rest of the nation cancels its spring sports. The Ivy League was a step ahead of everyone. Not that they're the smartest people in the room or anything, huh? So
right.
They knew exactly what they were doing. Well, 2 days ago, the Ivy League canceled, and it's heartbreaking. Heartbreaking, not just for those student athletes, football players, the volleyball players, the soccer players, men's and women's, the field hockey. I mean, oh my goodness, it's horrible. But they canceled. So what the Ivy League does matter, even though it's not a Power 5 conference, even though it's a very different economic model. And I think it matters in this way the most. Every university we're talking about in the Big Ten, where I went, Northwestern, every university we're talking about, the Pac-12 and the SEC and all of our big Power 5 conferences and other places that play football. All those universities have presidents, and every one of those presidents reveres the Ivy League. Many of them have roots in the Ivy League. Some went there, some may have worked there. They all have friends in the Ivy League. So the Ivy League has an outsized role to play here because university presidents are always ignored when we think of decision-making in universities, right? In sports, we think of the athletic director, we think of coaches. Guess what? Guess who's calling the shots? The presidents. And the presidents have already seen what the Ivy League has done, and that matters to them greatly. And also governors and mayors. The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, has a big say on whether Michigan or Michigan State are playing football and field hockey and everything this fall. The governor of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker, who I actually know from our Northwestern roots, J.B. as governor, he has a big role to play in decision-making for Northwestern and for Illinois, as does Mayor Lori Lightfoot in Chicago with the Cubs and the White Sox, all these things. So this is sports as a part of our society. We always know they're a part of our society, right? The taxes to build the stadium, whatever, all the gifts, to have them come and do whatever. They're always an integral part of our society. Everyone cheers for them. Having the parades when they win the championships, of course. Well, there's another piece to this, and that is an integral member of our society and a productive member, a good citizen at this time. Is it safe and healthy? And the key question for me has been for a couple months now is how many deaths, how many hospitalizations, how many illnesses are we willing to accept in the United States to have our football? It's a pretty chilling question, isn't it?
It really is.
And there's people debating it too. Like that's the part for me that rings true is when you see Stanford, and I believe I looked it up when they made the announcement they're cutting a bunch of their sports for this season. I believe their endowment is something like $27.7 billion with a B. How many, the response to this in the United States, how many programs do you think it will cost over the long term? Like, I don't know that, outside of the major schools that they'll get their money back. Are we going to lose program after program after program in the United States? In all sports?
Yes. Yeah. I think so. Yeah, I mean, the last to go would be football programs and men's or women's basketball. But yes, when Stanford, it's so good. It's perfect that you mentioned Stanford, because this week will go down. There'll be books written about this week in sports, in college sports, and it's just amazing, sad, cataclysmic, whatever words you want to use, week in college sports. By the way, the big news may come in a few more weeks, but still, it's been a very tumultuous time, and the fact that Stanford cut 11 sports, the big ones were wrestling for the men and field hockey, sailing. Stanford has so many sports. When Stanford is cutting 11 sports, watch out. Yeah. Stanford has so many.
Sure.
And it loves to have them. And it wins those, all the Directors' Cup and all that every year for the best performance by, university, women's program, men's program, whatever, because they have great swimming programs and great soccer and men's and women's, especially women's basketball and volleyball and national team. Exactly. And of course, always good in football too. Pretty good. So they care so much about their sports. When they cut 11 sports, 11, I could scream it from the rooftops. That is such a signal. So you combine that, which of course they already had that planned. And by the way, the endowments are already geared. Like so much of the endowment money would already be spoken for academically, I'm sure, for research, for professorship. So it's not, I know people have said, I know you didn't say it, but people said, well, why could you dip in and save the field hockey team? No, that's not how it works. Not how it works, and will never work that way at Stanford. Won't work that way at Northwestern, my alma mater, which is, the Chicago, a little bit colder version of the same school in terms of academics first, always. And so, that's where we are. But you combine that with the fact, as we just said, and this gives me no joy. I mean, as a journalist, I'm talking about it. It's heartbreaking. It's horrible to think. I love college sports. I love football. I have a niece who's a great high school athlete that may not be able to play her sport, volleyball, this fall. I mean, that makes me sad. So this hits home. I'm not going, oh, yippee, yay, a journalist wants to have, stories. No, this is horrible. But if you then lose football for the year, what we saw with Stanford, now that passes prologue, all of a sudden now, whoa, watch out. And it will be carnage. It will be, as I said, catastrophic for these colleges if they don't have that revenue, knowing how tough it's already been. We're going to lose so many men's Olympic sports, we call them, men's minor sports, so to speak, and women's sports, lesser degree because of Title IX, but still, and these will be people that will be wonderful citizens and giving back to their university community for the next 50 or 60 years. They'll graduate and they'll be wonderful, wonderful alums, and you're going to now lose their sports and maybe lose them in the process.
Christine, we appreciate the time. Yeah, it's heavy. It's a lot. It's so much to process.
And all the never mind the coaches who lose jobs. Like there's so many different layers to it that make it tough to breathe in. Thanks for doing this, Christine. We really appreciate it.
The loss of life would be worse. And of course, it's all screwed up because of the man that's 4 miles away from me. Let's just say that. The lack of leadership here is astounding. It has put us in this mess. So anyway.
You're here to that. Ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
I like how we can. I like how we can anyway that. There's.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, him. Yeah. That's it. I mean, if we handled it properly, it might be an entirely different story. Anyway, take care and hope everyone stays safe.